Hey guys, it's Renee Grinneman. I'm here with Spirited Growth is my company. I'm actually a mental health counselor, and I help caregivers and world changers lead a vibrant, hell yeah, life worth living. I do that by teaching people how to use their body-mind as a guide towards self-care and building resiliency. So I work with a lot of anxiety and trauma. I teach people to tame the fight or flight response, and I help people to get past limiting beliefs and really live their best life using research-based techniques like yoga therapy, EMDR, I do hypnotherapy, and I do a lot of embodied mindfulness work, which means paying attention to what's happening right now in this moment. And so I was asked to get online today and talk a little bit about the types of things that I recommend to clients whenever they're in that moment of need or duress. And so one of the first things that I always do is start working with clients on their baseline practices. And then we progress towards what I call our quick turnaround techniques. So in terms of baseline practices, these are the things that we engage in on a daily basis, hopefully, or at least a regular basis. Things like getting out into nature, journaling, movement, yoga, meditation, exercise, connecting with friends, gratitude practices, breath work. There's all kinds of things that can help us, playing with pets, all these things that we can engage in and do on purpose to really expand our resiliency and our ability to access calm on a continuous basis. Then after we've got some of those practices in place, we start working on some of the quick turnaround techniques. And like I said, these are the things that we're going to grab onto in our moment of need, our moment of intensity. And in order to understand how to engage these techniques, we really need to understand a little something about the brain's response to stress and also the non-localized mind. And what I mean by that is we have a brain response. We tend to think about our brain, but there's an immediate and patterned response to any emotional state that comes through the mind, and it goes straight into the body so that we're ready and prepared to act in the proper ways. So talking about the brain, here's my model of the brain that I usually use. So this here, right here, is the area of the brain that we're concerned about, which is the animal brain. And the animal brain is the part of the brain that is concerned about survival. And that animal brain is hardwired connected to the spinal column, which is different than other parts of the brain. And there's a reason for that. That hardwiring allows us, if there's an immediate danger, like a saber-toothed tiger that's about to attack, we want a fraction of a second advantage so that maybe we can escape and survive the situation. What that does, though, is because it's survival-based and because that propensity is in there, we have this propensity towards the negative. That means we're going to sense, detect negative things that are going on much more readily than positive things. And so that means it's even more important for us to engage in some of those self-care practices to help us to maintain that steady state. It's really imperative. So anyway, animal brain's about survival. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the responses that happen automatically. First of all, with the animal brain, one of the things that will happen immediately is our breath will become more shallow. And so a really quick check for yourself at any point during the day about what kind of state you're in is just to pause and notice your breath. What's happening now with my breath? And so if you discover that the breath is relatively shallow or constricted, or if it's not flowing easily, that can tell you something about how the body is currently responding. So without trying to change it, just sit with it, watch it, and then see what story it's telling you. Okay? So immediately animal brain restricts the breath, and there's a reason for that. And one of those reasons is that whenever we breathe more shallowly, our hearing can become more acute. And so we can sense if the saber-toothed tiger is sneaking up on us. So that's one thing that happens. Another thing that happens is the gaze intensifies. And so once I know that there's a saber-toothed tiger in the neighborhood, my gaze is going to go really strong towards that animal, towards that threat. And so you will notice that your gaze gets very intense And so one of the things that I'll tell people to do is actually relax their gaze. So by softening the gaze, what I mean is continue looking at something straight ahead of you, but actually start to take in the periphery. That means the outer edges. See how much you can notice around you. And immediately the eyes soften, the muscles around the eyes, and it creates a counter response or a relaxation response in the body. So there's two of the things that happen. Another thing that happens is blood flow shifts. The blood gets shifted to the parts of the body that are needed for survival, things like the arms and legs so that we can run, escape, fight. There's also responses in the there's responses in the muscles as well, like muscles start to tighten. So when we're aware of all these things, we can actually start to hack the system, is how I talk about it. It empowers us to deal with our stress when we understand how stress works. And that actually it's really a natural state. And it's actually a state we want, because if there is a saber-toothed tiger, we want to be prepared. All right. So basically, the reason understanding animal brain is important is that we need to know what that animal brain is trying to communicate. The animal brain has one big job, and it is to alert us and to help us take action. So if we know that and we attend to the animal brain's needs, it will allow us to shift faster. So a lot of times you hear people talk about breath as the first way of intervening, and it is a very effective way of intervening with the stress response. So what I tell people to do, what I talk to people about, is the fact that there's two parts to the breath. There is the inhale and the exhale. In general, the inhale is considered an invigorating part of the breath. And so that means, what I mean by that is that is used to get us activated and ready to respond. So if you think about a time that you've been startled, which means you've flipped into fight or flight, one of our first responses is, so we get startled in that way. We pull breath in so that we're ready to take flight. Now, the other side of the breath, the exhale, is a calming breath. And that calming breath is really important. That's the part that we want to start accessing when we're stressed. And the calming part of the breath actually taps into the parasympathetic nervous system. So all the time we're engaging in various degrees of activating and calming the body. And we can actually learn different breathing patterns to manipulate those responses. But in general, just so you can start using this, an exhale is going to be the calming part of the breath, and you'll want to make it more and more a part of your breathing. And so a lot of times people are reverse breathers in terms of their inhale is longer and deeper. And what we want to do is get to a slightly longer and deeper exhale, or at least get to equal, which is usually the first point we want to get to. Okay? So we use the breath in that way. However, sometimes when the threat is seen as very, very serious, shifting the breath in that way can become more agitating. And this is where it gets tricky for people. You know, we're always told, oh, just breathe. And it does work, but if it's extreme duress, you need to have something to do before the breath. And so what I want you to think of in terms of the before the breath is the animal brain is very actively trying to communicate something. It says, there's a saber-toothed tiger. You come in with the calming breath, and the brain thinks, no, the tiger's still there. It's going to be like, no, seriously, pay attention. You are not hearing me. And so it's going to up the ante. It's going to make the response stronger. And that's why sometimes the breath can become more agitating. And so what I tell people is, if you're anxious and it feels like you're vibrating up here, like, ugh, and then somebody says, oh, just breathe, there's just like such a big discrepancy between these two states you can't access through the breath. And so what we need to do instead is start satisfying that animal brain, get a little closer to this level. And so some of the things that can help with that is recognizing how animals communicate. And animals communicate not through words, but through sensation. And so we need to start thinking about using the body as our first line of intervention. So if you think about animals, what do animals do when they're stressed or in danger? Well, often they'll get out of dodge. They're going to take off running. Okay, and so getting moving in some vigorous way can be really helpful. A lot of times I'll tell people to do a lot of random shaking and dancing, like just dance around, shake your arms out, things like that. Helps to release some of the adrenaline and also satisfies that animal brain's need to take action. Okay. Another thing that we can do is to get strong. Again, thinking about how the animal wants to fight off the danger. And so doing things that engage the core, like planks, push-ups, squats, chair poses, things like that, help to activate that core and help us to feel stronger and like we're prepared for the attack. Getting big can be really helpful. So making your body really large, expanding, opening that heart, feeling your strength. I mentioned the shaking. Another good thing about the shaking, too, is after an animal has successfully escaped the danger, what they're going to do is they're going to find a safe place, and an animal will actually shake it off. They're going to release that adrenaline and get this energy released through the body that allows them to let go of the perceived danger. Us as humans, we tend to not allow that shaking because it's not really socially acceptable, and it will actually get stuck in our body then. The body gets stuck because the body actually hi everyone, I'm seeing the hellos coming through, thank you. But the body wants to be prepared. So if it feels like the danger was not thoroughly satisfied, then it's going to keep a recording of the danger and the response in the body. And so anything that comes even close to this old image of thoughts, feelings, sounds, memories, emotions, body sensations, sensory experiences, anything that comes close to that old thing can easily pull on the components of that memory, and we're immediately activated to the right level of response as though the danger is there. The problem is that sometimes the danger is not there anymore, and that's where things get stuck in our body, like traumas and anxieties. Okay, so if we actually allow ourselves to do that shaking it off after an extreme event, if you can get to some place where that is acceptable, whether it's a bathroom stall or your bedroom or whatever it is, that can be really helpful too. So the other thing I mentioned is you can soften the gaze. You can do, if you're in an intense situation with people around, you can do things like tighten and release the hands. People probably will not notice that as much. Squeeze the toes in the shoes to ground. All these things are really important to allowing the animal body to feel like it's been heard and that it has been successful in taking action. Okay? So if you can do things that allow those two things to happen, then things will resolve more quickly. Now all of a sudden we go from here to here, and something like breath or our next practice is going to be more successful at that point. It seems like there was I know what else I wanted to tell you about. The other thing that can be really helpful in those moments of intensity, besides softening the gaze, is actually taking the time to look around and move around your environment. And that is an animal response as well. If you think about it, if there's a saber-toothed tiger around, the animal brain is going to want to keep scanning the environment and make sure that it's safe. And so it's actually programmed in our body that if we're literally moving our body around, allowing ourselves to shift around in that way, that can be very helpful in taming the response. Finally, mindfulness can be very helpful. And the reason I bring up mindfulness is sometimes we're triggered, but we're actually safe. Okay, I demonstrate this in workshops all the time where I'll like wave something in front of someone's face. It's no threat, I'm just waving my hand around, but we perceive it as a threat because it feels unpredictable, and they go into this fight or flight response. And so actually starting to recognize those moments and then actually use mindfulness. So by mindfulness, I'm talking about noticing what's happening in a calm and accepting way and labeling what's happening around you. Mindfulness can also be used by engaging in scanning the environment. So not only can we scan the environment with our body and our eyes, but we can actually engage in scanning the environment through questions that heighten our awareness. An example is like every 5 or 10 seconds shifting around. So can you notice the knob on the door? Can you notice the sound of the car outside? Can you notice the feel of your breath going past the tip of your nose? So I'm going a little quickly here for the sake of the live interview, but if you keep shifting your awareness from thing to thing and then pause there for 5 to 10 seconds, you will be able to actually use mindful awareness to satisfy that animal brain and shift states. And this is really important when we're in the crux of intensity. So hopefully that helps. Those are some of the basics of what I teach clients, children and adults. And I'll be glad to talk to you about any of this in more detail. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below, and I'll be glad to attend to those as I get near a computer over the next couple of days. Thanks so much. This is my first time on Facebook Live, so hopefully I'm going to finish this successfully. We'll see you next time.